Is it recorded? After the 7 Years' War, Britain established the Proclamation of 1763 that gave natives land of the West. The colonists were angered with Britain. They couldn't understand why they couldn't move west after the war. They rebelled and killed Indians to make a point. During the war, many had begun to note important contrasts between themselves and the mother country. The 7 Years' War also strengthened a sense of identity among the colonies. Farmers who never before had ventured outside the communities of their birth fought in distant regions with men like themselves from other countries. Such experience reinforced a developing nationalist perspective from 1735 to 1775. While trade with Britain doubled, commerce among the colonies increased by a factor of 4. People and ideas moved along with goods. The first stage lines linking seaboard cities began operation in the 1750s. Spurred by Postmaster Benjamin Franklin, many colonies built or improved postboards for transporting the mails. Engineering a sense of American political identity was soon tested by British measures designed to raise revenues in the colonies. To obtain revenue from being in debt due to war in 1764, the Sugar Act was pushed through Parliament. The Sugar Act placed a duty on sugar imported into colonies and increased restrictions on colonial commerce. Taxes in the colonies were much lower than taxes at home. In early 1765, George Grenville followed the Sugar Act with the Stamp Act. This law taxed stamped paper for legal documents, publications, and playing cards. Many colonists complained about being burdened with taxes. Colonies had taken drastic measures of denouncing the Stamp Act. Can you go to the next one? Denouncing the Stamp Act and proclaiming their support of no taxation with their representation. Pressured by British merchants who worried over the effects of the growing non-importation movements among the colonists, in March 1776, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act and reduced the duties under the Sugar Act. Celebration throughout the colonies and non-importation associations were disbanded. However, in 1776, the Declaratory Act was passed to accompany any repeal of Stamp Act, that Parliament had the authority to legislate for colonies in all cases whatsoever. They pretty much told the colonists that they can pass any law they want and colonies have to obey. The Declaratory Act signaled that the conflict had not been resolved, but merely postponed.
The Townshend Act. In the 1760s, there was a rapid turnover of government leaders that made it difficult for Britain to form a consistent policy towards the colonies. Townshend hoped to redress colonial grievances against internal taxes such as those imposed by the Stamp Act. The Boston Massacre happened on March 5, 1770. 5 civilians died as a result of the incident. 3 died on the scene and 2 died later. 4,000 troops were dispatched to Boston in October of 1768, not a small number considering that Boston's population was only about 20,000 residents at the time. First Committee of Correspondence were formed temporarily to address a particular problem. Once a resolution was achieved, they were disbanded. The first formal committee established in Boston in 1964 was to rally opposition to the Currency Act and popular reforms imposed on the Customs Service. The Tea Act. It was an act of the Parliament of Great Britain. Its objective was to undercut the price of tea smuggled into Great Britain's North American colonies in preference to that of the British East India Company, and thereby convince the colonists to accept Parliament's right of taxation. The Boston Tea Party, a direct action by colonists in Boston, a town in the British colony of Massachusetts, against the British government and the monopolistic East India Company that controlled all the tea coming into the colonies. On December 6, 1773, after officials in Boston refused to return 3 shiploads of tea back to Britain, a group of colonists boarded the ships and destroyed the tea by throwing it into Boston Harbor. It was a key event in the growth of the American Revolution.
The First Continental Congress was a convention of delegates from 12 colonies out of 13 that met on September 5, 1774. The province of Georgia did not send delegates, however. They made a compact among the colonies to boycott British goods beginning on December 1st that year. Imports from Britain dropped greatly. Lexington and Concord was the first military engagement of the American Revolutionary War. The battles marked the outbreaks of an open armed conflict between Great Britain and its 13 colonies. The Second Continental Congress managed the colonial war effort, adopted the United States Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. Georgia was still absent but joined by the end of the summer. On May 15th, the Second Continental Congress decided to put the colonies in a state of defense. On June 14th, they resolved to supplement the New England militiamen with 6 of expert riflemen raised in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. They had to select a man to command these forces, and it was a mutual agreement that it should be George Washington. Common Sense was Thomas Paine. Was first written anonymously presented the American colonists with an argument for freedom from British rule, when independence was still undecided. Paine made political ideas understandable for a common audience, bringing average Americans into political debate. A vast majority agreed with the idea of independence from British rule. The Declaration of Independence announced that the 13 colonies regarded themselves as independent states. The idea of equality inspired everyone, no matter the class, gender, or race. In voting for the independence, the delegates proclaimed their community, but they also committed treason against their king and empire.